Whether you love to give it or hate to receive it, unsolicited advice can be the cause of many unnecessary conflicts. In this video, I want to unpick a conversation that was very kindly served to me by the Threads algorithm this morning, and use it to consider ways that we might avoid unnecessary suffering that comes when we're talking at cross purposes with other people, and this leads to weird escalations of conflict when interacting with people, especially online. Incidentally, the fact that this landed in my feed is another reason I'm just like, Threads, I'm not sure it's ultimately going to be the utopian refuge from Twitter that we might have hoped it would be. I never really hoped it would be that, or never really thought it would be that. But yeah, it's got the same underlying stuff going on. So it's a shame that it seems like an equally irresponsible algorithm that actively incentivizes and encourages pylons for people. And people who don't have a huge number of followers, they'll post something pretty innocuous, and because the nature of the post has something divisive in it, maybe catches a wave and just goes disproportionately viral, leaving the person with thousands of people weighing in on something that, it was just like an off-the-cuff, offhand comment that probably didn't give much thought to, and certainly didn't do because they thought this would happen. Anyway, that's irrelevant to the topic at hand, which is the idea of unsolicited advice and also the mechanics of communication. I'm fascinated by the way we communicate and how peace and conflict can break out depending on the way that we interact with each other, the words we use, the way we hold the person that we're speaking to, the faith that we bring to the conversation, and the assumptions that we make before a word is spoken, and also how we respond to emotional triggers that might wind us up within a conversation, and how we hold the temptation to respond in certain ways, to lash out and fight. Are we there actively in the process of choosing the way that we're going to respond to those feelings as they arise in us? And I think this exchange is an example of exactly that. The first post here is the one that I saw. This was a repost that the original poster had made in order to draw attention to the conversation that had already taken place. But unsolicited advice, I guess, is the main core of this, something I think about quite a lot. There is something about the entitlement that people sometimes feel to tell others what to do when they haven't been asked, and they don't really know the other person's personal circumstance. They don't know the values that person has or the goals that they have. They just make all of these assumptions and tell you what if I was you, this is what I would do. But they don't put any time into getting to know you. They don't know what it means to be you. They're more like, if I was in your position and I was still me, and I had the goals and the values and the beliefs and the assumptions that I have, then this is what I would do. And it's like, no, you're not in that position. But I do also have sympathy sometimes with people who do this, because I know it doesn't always come from a place or a spirit of entitlement. It doesn't always come from a place where they're kind of self-righteous or trying to lord it over you. For some people, it is a genuine way of expressing their real deep desire to care and to connect. And I don't really like the conversation around love languages, but it's that kind of thing. It's the way that they want to be there for other people. So honoring that while maintaining boundaries is kind of a key part of nurturing and maintaining relationships, and also a broader culture of peaceableness and compassion through these small everyday exchanges that we're probably partaking in quite a lot. And I wanted to highlight this one because I think we can see some of the stuff that contributes to a culture of outrage and disdain and division in here. And we can, to draw some broader parallels and conclusions from it. It originally started with this tweet: craft show at the courthouse downtown today. I made $72. The space cost me $100. Sigh. So it starts with human one, we'll call them human one and human two, reporting the events of the day pretty objectively. You know, they'd lost $28 at a craft show and made less money than the space had cost them to rent. No indication of the type of responses that they're maybe wanting by posting this on Threads, or whether they're even, looking for comments at all. It might just be, I just needed to get that off my chest. I just needed to share that. And so a response requires an assumption at this stage from the reader. What are they saying? And I guess the sigh at the end would perhaps indicate that they're feeling a bit disappointed. They're feeling a bit deflated by the whole experience. That's what they're communicating with that. So a response might be like, sounds like you're feeling disappointed with the fact that it cost you more money to be at the show than you made from the sales. That's about all we can take from it at this stage. And so this post has been interpreted as whining, as complaining, and as entitlement to sales by people in the comments, some people in the comments. But there's actually no value judgment at all in the wording of that original post. It's just an objective reporting of the facts. There's no blaming in there. There's no sense of being a victim of anything. It just tells a story in a pretty objective way. And then Human 2 arrives with what looks like an apparent desire to make something good happen for Human 1 after having read that original post. So they say, tell everyone to go and buy art from her online and turn this sigh-worthy situation basically into something good at the end of the day, so that something positive comes out of it. The first problem, I think, arrives at the end of this comment, where an assumption is made in the question that is asked, which is, where is your Etsy shop? Now, taking this in good faith, which I think is important, assuming the best in people until and unless they prove themselves otherwise. And in this case, it's to think, they're not asking where the Etsy shop is because they know you don't have one and they want to talk down to you and make a point about the fact that, well, I can't believe you can't expect to make sales if you don't have an Etsy shop. Rather, they've maybe just jumped to the assumption that Human 1 has an Etsy shop because lots of people who do and sell craft things do have Etsy shops. And they're asking for a URL so that they can encourage other people to go and buy the stuff. Any other interpretation at this stage, from what we've seen there, from the words and the statements that have been made and the questions, require a bit of a journey between the lines. It requires you to add some subtext. As far as I know, these two people haven't had a prior relationship or exchange. I might be wrong, but yeah, I think I'm just taking this at face value. So just taking the words that we see as the only information that we really have at this stage. And this is where we see the exchange derail a bit. Human 1 ignores the first part of that reply and jumps straight to the question, which you get the sense maybe being interpreted as judgment, as criticism. You might think, I'm being criticized for not having an Etsy shop. It can poke at certain insecurities and vulnerabilities that might be bubbling away subconsciously or beneath the surface somewhere, that are just, waiting to turn into little shame attacks. But if we look, the original post said nothing about actually wanting to make more money, especially outside of the context of that particular live show as well. That's all we have. So this exchange is veering towards a solution to a problem or a need that hasn't been expressed. And then we get a short response from the original poster, which ignores the first part of their reply, as I say, and it says, I don't have one. So I was wondering, what could have maybe nipped this in the bud, perhaps changed the trajectory of the exchange or brought it to a amicable conclusion at this point. And I guess it's a bit of an acknowledgement for the first part. So thanks for encouraging people to support me. And then I don't have an online store at the moment. I might choose to set one up in the future if it feels right for me, but it's not a priority right now. And so this kind of shows gratitude for the desire to help kind of taking that first part of the reply as a genuine desire to support you and to support your art. But it also establishes a position of autonomy and kind of demonstrates that actually, do you know what? I'm not looking for advice. It's just not a priority. And this is not an excuse or an explanation either. Like that's a really important part of boundaries is let your no be a no and let that be enough. But this is enough. It doesn't actually invite further solving from the other person. It's a soft front and a firm back boundary that offers that appreciation. It extends a hand of appreciation, but it declines the advice as well. Not perfectly worded, but the kind of the spirit of that sort of reply might have that impact. But as it is, I don't have one, actually keeps the focus on the specific Etsy store. So Human 2, potentially lacking a degree of awareness, I don't know, of the social cues that might seem obvious to other people, sees this as a green flag to continue along that path of offering the unsolicited advice. And again, it might seem strange to think that they've interpreted it like that. But I think when someone has their mind fixed on what they believe to be a really good solution for someone, they don't actually need much to feel like they have permission to share it. And all of a sudden, we have two people at cross purposes assuming the worst in each other. And ultimately, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that allows each to say, see, I was right. They are bad after they were acting in bad faith. But it's the assumption that bad faith is there that often creates the bad faith outcome. So then the next bit is not very hard to set up. Post a happy profile picture. Use a lot of keywords in your product title and descriptions. You can YouTube how simple. Now to go through that, not very hard to set up. So there's no indication that the reason she has chosen not to have an Etsy store is because it's hard to set up. Not looking for something easy. There's no indication that she wants one in the first place. Post a happy profile picture. Now this seems like a strange thing to write, strange detail, but maybe we could just take it as an indication that this person has a preference for happy profile pictures. They tend to buy from people who are smiling. And so he's just sharing a personal preference and turning that into a grander rule. Strangely, people do that. Perhaps there is data to support this. I don't know. Maybe there is. Then use a lot of keywords in your product title and descriptions. Okay, now we're talking about making it like optimizing it for search. And then you can use YouTube. It's simple. I don't know about you, but the idea of someone just waltzing onto my social media feed and giving me an apparent obligation to add to my to-do list doesn't fill me with great sort of joy. So there's a huge disconnect here because there has obviously there's been no request for advice at all. Like, there's been no request for this. And also we see an immediate deviation from the original purpose. So like the original post being the discrepancy between the money that was made at that craft show and the money that it cost her to set up her stall. And then what was present in his original reply was, I want to point people to a link for her Etsy store so that people can buy her work. But the reason now being given that Etsy is a good idea is to like stuff it with keywords so that people unrelated to this situation will find and buy her stuff. And another 4-word reply comes from Human 1 to this, not asking for advice. So this is a firm rejection of Human 2's attempts at helping, and the whole thing unravels further. Then he replies, okay, fine, I can understand that very well. Like, great. Okay, we can stop there. Everyone can carry on about their day. There's an understanding. Yes, I overstepped the mark. I understand you don't want advice. Great, fine. But no, they continue. And you can see where additional layers of meaning have been added and assumed. So he says you should be, as in asking for advice, if you want to sell better. Maybe you don't, but in this post, you sure complained about not selling. So there's assumptions here. You want to sell better. She hasn't actually said that at any point. There has been, unless you interpret that sigh as you want to sell better, you sure complained about not selling. Again, she didn't complain. She expressed maybe disappointment through that sigh. You complained is a judgment. It's the way we hear rather than what was expressed. And he's extrapolated the initial experience of selling in a live physical show to a complaint about not selling in general. The solution to which is to set up an online shop, specifically on Etsy, ready to be found by people through the search function. So we see a lot of conclusions being bounced to here, but yeah, when you sort of break it down a little bit, it's really obvious where there's some huge disconnections happening. And then he says, or am I mistaken? And so, yes, it would appear he is mistaken. And he's ready to admit that. Is he? Oh no, there's a second part to this sentence. It's not, or am I mistaken? And I've interpreted the disappointment as a desire to grow your sales in other ways. I jumped to this conclusion. My bad. Sorry, I'll leave you be. No, there's a reddening mist that has ascended and is now surrounding his fingers and his computer, whatever he's using. And the thing that he was mistaken about is that she is in fact a fuss bucket. And after a second thought, he doesn't want to buy from her. Funny and eye roll to you. So this exchange has derailed. It's going nowhere. Human one continues to focus on the very unwanted nature of what she's deemed as unsolicited advice. I get the impression that maybe she's bringing the baggage of past experience to this. And she's also absolutely right. She hasn't asked for advice. But those short, snappy replies are definitely going to be poking and enhancing the division rather than extinguishing this particular fire and giving the conversation a chance to end with a kind of that firm back, soft front gentleness that it maybe could have. So we now have two people, probably never really crossed paths before about 10 minutes ago, snapping at each other, influencing one another's moods, potentially, impacting their entire day or the way that they feel for the rest of the day. And he goes on, missensitivity. Okay. Now I think there's some absolutely understandable irritation on her part to how this has gone and to having someone weighed in the way that he has. But you can also see how this sense of rejection, as he's interpreted it, of what this person sees as a little post of encouragement from a helpful and caring spirit, whatever you make of that, it kind of leads to this feeling that he's now lost himself within. And if you go back to that first reply, maybe there was this desire to make the day better for her by getting people to buy stuff. And yeah, they've just gone on totally different trajectories from that point. And so she says, just stop. And then he says, sure, lol. So it didn't go particularly well. And I'm not saying how it should or even could have gone. It might have always ended up like that. It might have always kind of moved in that direction ultimately, especially if one of them was looking for a fight. It's difficult to tell. But I think there are things that we can reflect on from within this example. The assumptions that we make that are not grounded in evidence within the conversation itself. What are we bringing to conversations, the baggage, the between the lines reading of things, the good or bad faith that we ascribe to people's motives and desires, and how much baggage we carry from past exchanges with other people that we might then use to front load how we hear and the lens through which we view future interactions with strangers. So people, you've got no evidence that this is, what they mean, but we carry that stuff from past exchanges to other people. And whether there are patterns that emerge in those exchanges that leave us feeling like, everyone's very rude and horrible, aren't they? Every single person that I talk to ends up being deplorable. Maybe it's an opportunity to just think about what we bring and how we show up to those exchanges, whether there's a more going on and a common denominator there. As I say, I don't hold up much hope for Threads ultimately, because the algorithm amplifies these exchanges, and I'm sure I'm going to see loads of them now, and it invites more people to weigh in on them as well, and that doesn't contribute to the kind of world that I want to be part of creating. It's not the kind of world that I want to live in. It ultimately leads to more polarization and division and distrust. So I wonder I don't know how we turn the tide on that, whether we can, whether it's possible, or whether it's just a case of, just walk away. But yeah, that's why I cared enough to make this video. Because questions like how might we hold each other just with a bit more grace and compassion and good faith? And how might we communicate our boundaries in positive terms? That firm back, soft front gentleness that doesn't leave people feeling backed into a corner that they need to fight their way out of, or feeling completely on the outside, like rejected in ways that are potentially not necessary in order to establish those boundaries. I'm not saying that that's always possible, but where it is possible, how can we do a bit more of that? And the biggest thing for me is how we might listen to what others are actually communicating. What needs are they actually expressing? What are their values in relation to this situation? What was missing for them as they express disappointment or whatever it is? Is it disappointment that they're feeling, or have I just assumed that they're disappointed? Have I just assumed this feeling? Have I kind of projected that onto them because if I was in their shoes, that's probably what I'd be feeling? How do I know that's true for them? We can only know if we engage in a spirit of curiosity and we ask questions to clarify. And it's not about interrogating the other person and being like, right, what is it? It's just using questions to clarify and to open up and to explore with the person, and to get to a point where, if it is like that they want some advice, or if it is that they want to change something, they will make that known. You'll know that, rather than being like, I'm just trying to help by telling you what you should do, and jumping to assumptions. What is their goal beneath the noise? We shouldn't assume we know what someone wants, needs, or values just because they've said, I did a craft show at the courthouse and lost $28. Maybe they just needed to say that, and that's enough. Can that be enough? Or do we have a right to reply? I don't know. Anyway, I'll see you soon.